and you're live. Urvashi, a pleasure to have you on board. Please, the platform is all yours.
Thank you so much, Zubaan. A pleasure to be here as part of this wonderful festival. And hi, everyone. Welcome to this session on publishing. I'm Urvashi Butalia, and I'm the publisher at Zubaan, which is presenting this session in collaboration with Ameena. And we have a stunning panel of three amazing women talking to us. Ameena, Saiyid, Mehr, Husain, and Taiba, Abbas. All publishers, all women publishers, all doing really, really interesting work. So really in this panel or in this session, what we're going to look at is that often discussions about writing and literature look at the writing and literature itself, as this really lovely previous session was, where writers were talking about the books that are important to them and so on. But what we don't do much of is to look at how this work is produced and who produces it. And often when we do start to look at that, we tend to look at the big publishers, but really, if you look beyond that, at the small, the independent, the political and other kinds of publishers, you find that that's really where some of the oxygen, some of the new developments, some of the innovations are coming from, which allow publishing knowledge, literature to breathe, which allow us to have a world in which different kinds of breathing mix and which allow us to have a truly bibliodiverse world. And the interesting thing is that in recent years, more and more of this world has been populated by women who are creating content and publishing it with a passion that I think has so far been really unmatched. And I'm delighted to have three such women on this panel to talk about their work. I'm going to briefly introduce them and we'll go straight into a conversation with them after that. I'm not going to do long bios. So Ameena Saiyid is an old friend. We've known each other for many years. She's been in publishing for the longest time and has for over 30 years been the director of Oxford University Press in Pakistan, building it up into an amazing institution. She's headed many boards, has been on chambers of commerce, etc. And now, after many years, she's left the OUP to start her own publishing venture, which is what we're going to talk about today. Mehr Husain is the founder of a publishing house. She combines many things. She's a journalist, she's a writer, she's an academic, and now she's a publisher of Zuka books, starting actually some years ago in 2018 with a platform called Zuka, and then last year transforming that into Zuka books, and she already has a number of books to her credit. Taiba Abbas has a very, very interesting history of combining two loves, Pakistan and Italy, and starting a publishing house which has a really interesting name, Ala Books, and she's going to tell you a little bit about that. And that too, about a year ago, and it's called Books. And her work is in books and authors, and she's going to talk about her work. So straight off, let's get into the discussion. Welcome all three of you. And I want to start by putting a question to you, Mehr. What was it that pushed you from being a journalist into the world of publishing? And now that you are a few books old in publishing, what is actually that give you, what do you find here that excites you? And can you tell us a little bit about how you set up your publishing house?
Absolutely. Thank you, Urvashi, for your questions and for asking me to be on your panel. It's greatly appreciated. It's an honor to talk about our work. I started working as a journalist back in 2007. And it wasn't until 2014 that I was asked to be part of a book project documenting one of the oldest cities in the world, Multan, with regards to the Hindu, Sikh, Muslim colonial structures, which unfortunately some of them have been lost. And it was a 3-4-year project. And by the end of it, I thought I would never, ever write another book again, because it was such a difficult, arduous task putting all our research, everything together. But something had also been triggered inside of me when we were documenting these structures. What struck me was that there's a lack of research, there's a lack of original material in Pakistan that is available to the public with regards to female-oriented literature, because my co-author, Fawzia Qureshi, and myself, we were the only two females working on it in a team of men. And it was very difficult sort of convincing people that this is what we're doing and this is how we would like to present the book. And of course, we face the usual, aapko nahi pata baji, aapko nahi pata bibi, this baji. This really pushed me over the edge. I said, well, first of all, I have a name. Please use it. Secondly, I've been a writer for so long, so I know what I'm talking about. So that was my foray into the world of books. Afterwards, the more I began to look at the local market, I found myself increasingly frustrated by the type of literature that was being churned out, whether it was fiction or non-fiction. And it wasn't until 2016, 2017 when I started, it was just an ordinary morning, to be honest, and I was facing the usual daily struggle of what every woman faces, with children to feed, the school drop, the house staff isn't cooperating. And I sat there in my car. I just had a baby who I'd had to leave at home to drop my toddler off. And I thought, I am shattered beyond belief. And it was only until I saw another female who was in the opposite position of me, where she was well-dressed, extremely well-dressed, but she looked so unhappy. And again, that triggered me. And I thought, in my mind, it was a classic, the grass is greener on the other side, but in a female context, I thought, well, she's got everything. Why is she unhappy? And who's telling her to dress this way, where she's having to wear 4-inch heels to do the school drop? And that, the investigative journalist in me just woke up. The feminist, I come from a long line of feminists anyway. My khala was the first tractor driver in Pakistan. So that really got me triggered, and I delved down and I said, right, I want to investigate the fashion industry of Pakistan. What is this culture? And Urvashi, no matter where I looked, I couldn't find any material. I could not find anything. And so began my journey into publishing. And it's been very difficult. It has been rewarding. But you see, we have to look at the reality of it as well. Publishing in Pakistan is not easy. Writing original books is not easy. Doing your research is not easy. You face so many obstacles. And that's what pushed me to set up my publishing imprint, because I said, right, we need to do something about it. The current business model isn't working. Added to the mix was the Pakistani ban on Indian imports, which included books as well. And again, that pushed me. I went to the Minister of Commerce here. I tried speaking to the media here. I tried speaking to publishing houses in India, who unfortunately were holding me to account that we are not going to publish Pakistani authors till we can sell our books in Pakistan, which makes sense from a commercial perspective. But from a humanitarian point, how can you hold me, an author, to account for the state? You can't do that. It just didn't make sense to me. So that was another factor that led to me setting up this publishing platform. And since then, what I also never ever realized that women's writing was seen very differently through the male lens. Because the submissions that I received for my publishing house, whether it was my own book, the fashion book, whether it was The Burning Champa, which is Pakistan's first non-fiction poetry book about mental illness and body dysmorphia in women, whether it's this graphic novel I've just published about domestic abuse and the issues surrounding children's custody, male publishers here in Pakistan thought these were very trivial matters. Very trivial matters.
That's actually, sorry to interrupt, but that's not only publishers. I mean, that is how knowledge created by women and about women is seen as somehow inferior.
Absolutely. And the more I realized we need to get these works out and create a conversation around them, get these works out. If people are shocked, if they get upset, well, that's part of it. part and parcel of the package. Fact is, we have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And this
Great.
is where it began.
That's where it began, yeah. Okay, it's interesting to see the paths that lead women to publishing. Let me turn to Ala Books and hear from you, Taira, how you started. What was it that led you to become a publisher from being a student of comparative literature, from being a teacher and a writer? What was it? I think you had a really interesting story about being involved with a sort of writerly conversations, and that was what made you think of. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Thank you, Urvashi. It's such an honor for me to be here among all of you. And I will apologize in advance for any lag on my part because signals have been really bad over here for the past week. But my story is very similar to Meher's because the trade ban of 2019 definitely brought things to a head. But it wasn't the major motivating factor behind my decision. I come from a teaching background. So I think that all those years of teaching behind me made the transition into publishing not just easy, but I would say essential. Because so my motivation basically comes from a love for editing. It might sound a little weird because I know most writers dread that part of the writing process and they tend to hand it over to others. So it's not just to seek a level of objectivity, but maybe it's easier. But I think, having spent decades immersed in texts as a student and as a teacher and as a writer, and triangulating around texts by adopting multiple roles, just made me realize that, ironically, that personal connection made it easy for me to attain that level of objectivity that is a very, very essential part of the editing process. So that's how it began, roughly speaking. And this was, yes, early 2019. I already had 2 books that I was working on, a novel, which I hope to publish by the end of this year under Ala, and a co-authored book, which is Ala's first title, and it's in the process of being published. So the choice was right in front of me because I'm just someone who needs to be in creative control of the writing process and the publishing process. So that just goes hand in hand for me. So it was just, I would say, an immediate step, to launch a self-publishing platform, because this is what Ala basically is. It started out as that, and I need to explore the ways in which I can offer my help or my guidance to aspiring authors. But I have been fundamentally motivated by a need to question and address certain rampant misconceptions that exist in the publishing industry all over the world. We tend to put mainstream publishing at one end of the spectrum and niche publishing at the other. And obviously, independent publishing comes supposedly under niche publishing. And I find that very problematic because it tends to, the clear assumption is that writers who launch themselves through independent publishing are writing from the margins, and they are going against the larger tide of popular appeal, of mainstream appeal, going against the sway of things. But, one could easily argue the reverse, that mainstream publishers also have a way of gravitating towards just, I would say, very, very selective themes, cherry-picked themes, if you will. So in my own small way, those are the things I want to unpack through the books that I publish, through the authors that I can be lucky enough to launch. So that's what Ala's situation is at the moment. So, and I've yet to start out, and let's see how it goes. So I don't want to really get ahead of myself. I think it's important to keep one's eyes focused on one's goal, but one's methods should always be flexible and they should be practical and realistic. So
Yeah, I think, yes, practical and realistic are the key words. If you are to continue and sustain what you're doing, but the passion is really important. I mean, that's really what is the catalyst that starts it off. I was very interested in what you're saying about the margins and the mainstream, but I'm going to hold that for a moment and come back to it after I put my first question to Ameena as well, and then we come back for a second round. So, Ameena, for you, my question is as follows: that you actually have a long history in publishing, and you've been part of a large publishing house, which in many ways is a particular kind of battle, but is a very different kind of battle from the one that Mehr and Taiba are talking about. But now you've set up your own unit, and that is entering a very different terrain. That is the terrain not of the fiction book, the novel, the general reader book, but more of textbooks, which is also a very, very tough world to get into. So could you talk a little bit about what it's been like to now be on your own? What are the sort of excitements and vulnerabilities of that? And what is it like to be trying to enter this really difficult terrain, which is so closed off by and large to the small publisher?
Thank you, Urvashi, and it's a great pleasure to see you and meet everybody in this program. Well, it was certainly a big change for me to move from from running a big corporate publishing house like OUP to a small startup. And I've people normally start startups in their 20s, and I've done one at this age. After retirement, actually. And I was prepared. I thought that it would be extremely difficult being on my own, but I was very pleasantly surprised. I felt that when I started Lightstone Publishers, I mean, I had two wonderful people who joined me, again with a lot of editorial experience from OUP. Two women, and the three of us are actually now running this. And we started publishing textbooks. We've already published about 100 textbooks because we felt that in order to survive, we have to publish textbooks. But we've moved on to fiction as well. We will next month we'll be publishing Umar Shahid Hamid's latest book, Betrayal, and another fiction title. However, to tell you about my experience as a publisher, I think as an independent, I can only say that my feelings have been, I'm feeling truly empowered in this position. I feel I have so much autonomy. Which gives me control over decision making, over pricing, over the kind of books we publish, even where I travel, which events I attend. All this has given me such a sense of freedom and autonomy that I feel that it has made me very effective. I don't feel that my hands are tied and I have to. There's no bureaucracy to act as a barrier between my plans and my actions and decisions. That has made an enormous difference. And I feel that because of this, we are actually moving very fast. We are publishing books, within 6 months of receipt, whereas earlier it would take us almost that long to make a decision. Here we make a decision, complete the editorial work and publish within 6 months. And I think what has been wonderful is the response from the market. As you said, that it's not an easy terrain. It's a very crowded field. But yet, I find that there are about 120,000 private schools in Pakistan, which is our market. So far, we've only covered a few hundred. So, there's enormous potential. I feel we've only touched the tip of the iceberg. And when we go to a school to promote our books, we get a wonderful reaction because they feel that they are being offered another choice. And they do feel that they were lacking choices, and now they have another option. So the response has been very encouraging, as has been the response from authors. We are getting so many requests from authors and also from people who are applying for jobs. Unfortunately, we are so small that, and especially after the difficult year last year, things have been, because of COVID things, we haven't grown as much as we should have. But, we are getting so many requests for positions, for publishing their books. So it's very encouraging. I haven't missed my previous life at all. In fact, I'm really thrilled to be doing what I'm doing and at what the future holds.
Interesting. Thanks, Ameena, for all of that. So listening to all three of you, there are some things that stand out, which I think we could go back to, and I'm going to just mention those and leave it to you to choose who would like to come back on what. So I think, one of the things that Taiba and Mehr mentioned was the ways in which the trade barriers, as India-Pakistan hostility, enmity, whatever it is, kind of impacted their work, but in a very interesting, positive way. So as Taiba, I think you mentioned, that it kind of pushed you into doing books, and Mehr spoke of how Indian publishers, and Mehr, you went to the wrong Indian publishers, should have come to us, but that's an aside.
Yes.
How Indian publishers' refusal to entertain books by Pakistani authors pushed her into doing so. In some ways, what's a negative thing can have very, very interesting results. And so also for Ameena, in the sense retirement or, which people fear has led you to doing something new and exciting. So one is that thing. I want to ask you, Taiba spoke very movingly about looking at rethinking the margins and the mainstream. Do you, in your work, feel marginalized as because of the size or because of particularly Taiba and Mehr, the work that you're doing, the books that you're doing by women writers, even if not only women, but by women writers mostly? And secondly, Ameena spoke about survival. And it's one thing to bring passion and autonomy to your decisions, but it's quite another to work in the world of business, which is both cruel and difficult, and to keep your ideals. So how, is that something you've been thinking about that troubles you? What's the sort of experience you're having with the sales and distribution part of publishing? Because you've all mentioned good responses, but some of these issues, if you can talk about. So whoever wishes to can go first, or if you're, or should I just pick on one of you? Maybe I'll do that. Taiba, would you like to go first?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. And I do want to say that, yes, that barrier that was erected in 2019, ironically, it created wonderful connections for all of us. I mean, here we are now, and I think we're all looking forward to bigger connections. So I think it always works in everyone's favor to look at a situation always in an optimistic way. But I want to go back to the point about, about feeling marginalized or about writing from the margins. Obviously, I don't want to put I don't want to put the blame on traditional publishing as such, because traditional publishers have done tremendous work. But the problem arises when you see them as the chief players in the situation, the powers that be, so to speak. And independent publishers shouldn't be seen as some kind of intervention, as saviors of sorts. This should only be seen as a necessary addition to the publishing community. So if we are, as independent publishers, if we are here to promote and encourage and represent writers who are unrepresented, underrepresented, or come from, say, marginalized groups, silenced groups, I think they are the ones who are writing from the most important spaces. Because the truth is, writers from any part of the world, they live and write in liminal spaces. They cannot be defined by race or culture or country. If you begin to do that, that is the murder of literature, that is the murder of art. And the tragedy with traditional publishing is, traditional corporate publishing conglomerates, they do try to put you in a slot of global marketing. Where do you fit? Okay, if you're a Pakistani writer, if you're an Indian writer, if you're from anywhere else in the world, what exactly are you trying to represent? Where do you fit? What's your target audience? And I'm sorry to say, but that is a term I detest, target audience, because we don't write for readers, we write to create readers, right? So yeah, that's if we want to attempt to head towards the right direction, that can only come about by publishers all over the world, no terms over here, promoting, working towards an unfettered exploration of stories, of originality, of uniqueness. And I think it's really not that hard. I completely understand publishing is a business. That does not need to be overruled or set aside, but I think a balance can be brought about. The essence of art can be brought back into publishing without completely obliterating the corporate side. And that can only be done by making the publishing process reflect the writing process, by understanding what the inner creation of a story and the inner creation of a book is all about. And things like marketing and what kind of audience is drawn to the story, that will come much later, and that will be an organic process. So it shouldn't be predetermined.
Thank you. Thank you so much for actually complicating this whole thing, which is often seen in binaries of traditional and independent or mainstream and marginal and so on, and for pointing out, really, I think the very important thing that we often lose sight of, which is the need for a truly bibliodiverse world in which all kinds of voices can thrive and come together and be heard. So, yeah, great. Thank you for doing that. Mehr, can I turn to you? What's your take on this?
Absolutely. Look, Urvashi ji, we have traditional publishing.
You can just call me Urvashi. It's okay.
All right. Urvashi, we have the traditional publishing market in Pakistan. And I've experienced, or I've spoken to publishers, I've spoken to distribution networks, and what I've come to realize is that the market, publishers have grown, they've expanded, but they haven't developed further in terms of creativity or opening up new genres of writing. So the market has been stale for so long. And I had to make a conscious decision. Do I take them on and speak to them, ye kare, have you considered this? Have you tried to do this? Or I can take a step back and think, all right, you do you, I'm going to do my thing. And I prefer to do my thing because I'm the one, like Ameena Taiba said, I'm the one in control. I'm creating a narrative. I do not consider myself marginalized. I feel that I've actually created a new market for Pakistani publishing. I don't mean to sound arrogant or, claim that I've done this or done that. But when I look at the impact of my work, when was a brand and a national narrative was created? It's never been done before. It happened this time around. When was the last time a book about Pakistani culture was owned by young students and then turned into a series of university lectures? It hasn't been done before. So I see the impact of my work, and there's this sort of this awakening inside of me that as a female publisher, I am not, and I most certainly will not be labeled as a marginalized publisher, not at all. I have the mainstream market. I am creating it. I am defining it. And I would like my authors to be sources of inspiration for other writers to come forward and to create their work. With regards to the commercial side of it, Urvashi, for the longest time, the business model when it comes to Pakistan has not worked. It has not worked. And being practical, being pragmatic is very necessary. And in this digital age, those traditional means of marketing and distribution nationally, I haven't even gone international yet, nationally speaking, those, I was horrified at what I found. And I just sat there listening to these gentlemen say, this is the commission rate and this is the stocking rate. And I just sat there looking at them going, I can see what you're doing here. This is why the market hasn't worked. So no, I'm not going to play your game. I'm going to set the rules this time round. And I laugh now, I shouldn't laugh, but it was really sad when those same gentlemen rang me and said, Baji, aap hamare saath kaam kare, please come and work with us. And I said, how are you even doing this? What gives you the privilege to ring me after the way you spoke to me and after what you offered me? You think I'm going to work with you? Aap apna kaam kare, you do you, I'm going to do my thing. The two are completely separate. You've done your bit, you've played your part, it hasn't worked, I'm really sorry, but I'm not going to be held back anymore by any of you. So the commercial side is happening. And in this digital age where more and more women are on the internet, I work in development as well. And I see rural women running e-commerce businesses. They can't read, they can't write. They still sign their papers with their thumbs, the traditional thumb and ink, but they know how to navigate Facebook. They know how to navigate Instagram. It's brilliant. And that just gives me so much hope because I think, well, what are we doing? Here we are with our urban circles, with all our education. If we are not selling, if we are not commercially viable, then that is, I suppose there's no English word for this, but that's lanat on our face, shame on us, realistically speaking. We need to empower ourselves, and the digital way is the way to go. And it really does open up so many avenues for so many other females, self-published females, authors, writers, people from minority backgrounds, people who lead shadow lives, who are not able to be who they are in public. They are feeling empowered. And I think we are the mainstream. We are not marginalized. And we are earning money as well.
So true. Brilliant. Thank you so much for that passion. And it's really interesting, again, in what both of you have said is the innovation, the ways of thinking, new ways of thinking of how to get books out. You talked about your book being chapterized and being taught in universities. That's the kind of thing that being driven and believing in what you do leads you to think of those kinds of innovative ways of getting the work that you do.
Absolutely.
So that's great. Let me turn to Ameena and see, Ameena, what's...
Absolutely. And
Yeah, go on, Mehr.
as if right now for us, at least Taiba, I don't know how it is for you, but for myself, it's more about the impact of the work that matters most than the sales numbers. I'm not interested in it creates.
Okay.
I completely agree with you there.
Thank you. And Ameena, would you like to come in on this?
Urvashi, you spoke about sustainability and how we actually support ourselves. Well, I have to say that I have used the traditional methods of distribution because that's where I've been. I know that area so well, and I've been working in that area for so long that it was very easy for me to get in touch with the same major distributors and booksellers, suppliers all over Pakistan. And because we've long had a relationship of trust, it was very easy to continue with that. And I must say they have been of enormous support because through them we have managed to arrange the distribution of our books across the country. And we've been, but of course we've been very frugal because of our limited budget, I actually went to Quetta to promote our books, and I went in a coach, in a public coach. It was an overnight journey, and for I think three of us went. We didn't take off our masks for 10 hours because we were so afraid of being infected. So we've done our bit as far as trying to save money, but I find that has made us sustainable, and because our margins are so limited, we can have and this is what is giving me enormous rewards or satisfaction, that our books are affordable in the market. What really used to bother me was that we were producing good quality books, but the majority of pupils could not afford them. So this is a sense of enormous satisfaction to me, that our pricing is relevant to our situation over here. And it's very encouraging that we've actually had a couple of offers of people who want to go in for joint ventures with us. But of course, right now I'm not in a mood at all, because I'm enjoying the autonomy so much that we want to continue on our own. But I do feel that financially we have become viable because we've published textbooks and also some of our general books that, I'm very happy to say, Urvashi, that we published 5 women writers, I'm just very excited that we've got other requests from other women writers to publish, and certainly that is on top of my agenda. But I just see a lot of hope and potential for us. I mean, of course, we were affected by COVID, and that was a struggle. But this is our second year, which is almost now we just have a quarter left, because our financial year ends in June, as it does with the government. And our sales have increased 85% over last year. Of course, we started from a small base, but it's very encouraging.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I was hoping that we would have the last 15 minutes for questions, but in fact, we don't have time to take questions. We've barely got another 4 minutes, I think, for our panel before the next one comes in. So I'm just going to ask you, all three of you, to come in with some closing remarks. But if you could think about one aspect of this equation that we seldom talk about, which is the reader. So how do we start thinking of readers, or reaching them, or having them meet us halfway in the kind of publishing we do? If you have any thoughts to offer on that, maybe if each of you takes a minute, then we'll finish well on time. But if there's something else that you would like to say in closing, and you don't have to be dictated by what I'm interested in hearing from you, please. So, Ameena, shall we start with you, since we'll go in the reverse order? So, Ameena, Mehr, and Taiba.
Ji, Urvashi. Well, actually, readers are certainly on top of my mind, because I do feel that we are publishing for them. I mean, I think every author wants their books read. We get our feedback through literature festivals, where the audience actually comprises readers. And in our sessions, we organize the Adab Festival in Pakistan. And I find we leave a lot of time for Q&A, because people are there in person. This year we haven't had it. But we get wonderful feedback from readers, and I find they ask really challenging questions of authors. So I think readers are of great importance, and it's very important to get their feedback and their reactions to books. And I find that our authors enjoy it. And, it gives me an idea of how popular authors are. I mean, in one of my literature festivals, I actually saw a huge group of people, and I thought that, maybe this is a security issue, and maybe I should call security. It turned out that in the middle of that crowd was an author, a Sindhi author, Amar Jalil. And these were his fans who had surrounded him. And they were just moving with him. It was like a huge crowd moving in the same direction. And it was heartwarming to see that.
You know that happened with Zahida Hina once in India at the Jaipur Literature Festival, because she has such a huge following. She writes a column in the newspapers. There was, I think, thousands of people surrounding her, which is the nicest thing. Okay, Mehr, what about you?
Urvashi, within the context of Pakistan, 65% of the population is under the age of 40. This is a very young population. They're hip, they're trendy, they're technologically advanced, they are looking for new material. This is a generation that is after Taiba and mine, basically. We grew up in the shadow of 9/11. This generation is completely different. They want to own their identity and they want to be seen as modern citizens, part of the world, no longer as just Pakistanis. So I think that whatever literature has to be churned out, if it has to be economically viable, if it has to be sustainable, and if it has to have meaning, then that is your target market. And writers need to be encouraged from within the younger population. They need to be invested in, they need to be cultivated. And they're very independent. Long gone are the days when authors needed the hands to be held.
As they say in our part of the world, aapke muh mein ghee shakkar. Although that's not a fate I would wish on anyone. But thanks, Mehr. Taiba, what about you?
Well, about bringing readers to the fore, I think social media has really made that possible, because access and connection with the reading community is instant. So I would want more readers or more writers to come forward as players and join the field, because when anything becomes a monopoly, that's what's dangerous. If people shouldn't just rely on a couple of platforms and become complacent about it, they need to come forward and set up their own and make their mark. And again, to offer my own example, I have not approached publishing from a business angle. I've entered it from a very, very small personal space as a writer. I needed to get my work published and I set this up. So ALA is essentially a facilitating platform for debut authors to come forward, make a breakthrough, and get noticed. It's not an end in itself, because a book has to have multiple lives. It will have multiple reprints, multiple editions, and hopefully it will be published by other publishing houses, across borders, across countries, all over the world. So people should keep that in mind, and they need to just keep the ball rolling. So please, this is an earnest request to everyone watching and listening. Come forward, set up your own publishing platforms. The more the merrier.
The more the merrier. Thank you so much, Taiba. That's a brilliant note to end on. And I think, I'm really grateful to Ananke Festival for allowing us this panel, because it just shows how much there is to talk about for us across borders also. And really how many collaborations we can set up. There are numbers of really brilliant publishers in our part of the world, in other parts of the world, and we should really be talking to each other to learn from each other. So Taiba, Mehr, Ameena, thank you so much for giving your time, and
thank you.
It's great talking to you. Over to you.
Thank you, Urvashi. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Urvashi and Sabine.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, Mehr and Taiba. It has been an immense pleasure. And